Thanks for having me. My name is Siadam Edmo. I'm Shoshone Bannock Nez Perce Yakima. My people are originally from Celilo Village along the Columbia River, and I'm the tribal community coordinator for We Count Oregon. Before I start talking about the census, I just wanted to share a little bit about my own background and kind of what called me and brought me to this work. Um, I have been thinking and writing about Indian identity for quite some time. Um, I'm an unenrolled person. So my father's enrolled Shoshone Bannock, but uh, I do not have currently the blood quantum necessary in any of the tribes that I'm descendant from to enroll myself or even though my husband is also Native, any of our children. So this is, and his father was a graduate of one of the first Indian law classes at the UCLA, and was the first in-house counsel for the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. So, and my father's work in cultural preservation, right? So we have two very strong, and actually all four of my parents and my husband's parents have really dedicated their lives to the preservation and protection of tribal sovereignty of our cultural and traditional ways. And so we're in this place and space where none of their grandchildren are eligible to be enrolled in the tribes in which they are descendant from, or any of our partners are descendant from. So it's an interesting time to have conversations uh, about identity, about power, about money, and about representation, which is what the We Count campaign is about lifting up the voices of folks marginalized. And it's a complicated and never perfect space to kind of wrestle with those. So as a tribal person and as a scholar and author who has talked about this and written about this for several years now, I fully believe in tribes' rights to determine who is a citizen and who is not, right? It's part of our inherent sovereignty. It's traditionally part of how we determined who belonged and who didn't, far before the United States government came to this land. And at the same time, I also understand that process has been messed with, right? The whole idea of blood quantum, the whole idea of having our children and grandchildren not belong has serious consequences for our kids, right? That feeling of not belonging to a culture that you have so many, historical, ancestral, Aboriginal, and spiritual ties to is painful, to be told that you don't belong. But the census really, for me, sits in this space of, it's this thing that the U.S. government does. It's in our Constitution, right? But it's also, what could, if we project forward, do we even know as tribal nations? Some might, and some might not. What potentially could be our future? Where are our human resources? What could our population look like if we really had all people who were descendant from our tribal nations belong to our tribal nations, right? How have the politics of eugenics seeped into how we operate? Why do we think that we should limit the number of what's driving those things? What's driving those ideas of we must limit our tribal nations? I think the answer is the same answer for so many of our marginalized communities, right? It's racism, it's sexism, particularly, it's heterosexism, and how those things play out in a tribal and multi-tribal context, right? So the idea that a woman who we say in many tribal communities that we so value women, um, and their leadership, and that they're sacred, but to reduce the value of a woman or a person with a womb to their ability to birth the next generation of tribally enrollable people is to reduce us and our role in our tribal societies. It is, and for communities who have experienced, like many other women of color, right, forced sterilization, and putting pressure on us to produce that next generation of tribally enrollable people. And you look at that combined with um, the exotification and, you know, rape, incest, the highest rates of rape and incest of women occur in many tribal communities. And now that is also exacerbated with the rise of missing and murdered Indigenous people. Um, so all of these things kind of create the context for this conversation around the census and um, around who matters and where they are. And right now, um, you know, not to put too fine a point on some of the census work, but we just had the CARES Act move forward. And for tribal communities, the amount of money that each tribal community received was based on census data. So it is so it is so important that we ensure that our tribal communities are completely counted, because it is in these times of crisis, of pandemic, of squeezed resources, of the highest unemployment rates, that we ensure that we get the share of resources that we need. Um, so those are all the reasons um, why, even though, you know, I do some other work full time, that I felt really called towards census and towards my own community here, and doing all I can to help ensure that this process, although I know it's not going to be perfect, that it's that it has as much fidelity and um, authority coming from within our own tribal communities. So this is the book. It's called American Indian Identity, Citizenship, Membership, and Blood. It comes out of Prager Press. Um, and, you know, my story is, I don't even though I think Prager as a publishing house primarily actually services libraries, college libraries. And I just want to put it out there. I'm a proud college dropout, but I just love I I love writing and thinking and wrestling with a lot of these, you know, a lot of these ideas. But ultimately, I do, right. I do think it's, and most of my professional career has also been in higher education. But I left, and it was partly because I feel like institutions that were designed to maintain social hierarchies are probably not going to be the places where um, we begin to break them down. And um, so, and that's not to say that it's not saying anything about anybody's path that they've, you know, that they've chosen. I've got a number of amazing, you know, colleagues and friends who are professors, who are critical thinkers, and that is the space and place that they put their activism to work. It's just not my place, and it's not everybody's place, and I think that's okay. So when we started the book, gosh, in 2015, 2016, pulled together our author family, and we just decided to write a kind of why, because the end product that we wanted to get to was um, really about speaking to tribal leaders and talking about why we needed reform of the whole identification kind of system. Like, what were some of the problematic underlying assumptions that we were holding as tribal communities, and how are we going to begin to get to a place where it really was about the things we wanted it to be about. Um, so so here's how we began the book, and this part comes from the preface. Academic researchers and the production of academic discourse in this country have largely laid claims to be objective and unbiased. The record and history of their work tells us the opposite, as the policies and structures that they have created and justified through that discourse have had discriminatory results, diminishing, disenfranchising, and othering our knowledge, our humanity, and our authority through court decisions and the development of harmful federal Indian policies. We do not pretend to be objective observers. In fact, we find little value in such perspectives. It is therefore not only important, but also essential that we place within this conversations ourselves and our experiences in regard to Indian identity.